John had always been the kind of man who took pride in routine. He worked as a mechanist at a factory on the outskirts of town, a place that smelled like oil and metal shavings. The factory had been there longer than John had been alive, its creaky floors and fluorescent lights part of the steady hum of his daily existence. It wasn't glamorous work, just punching in at 8 a.m., working at the machines, and punching out at 4:30 p.m., but it paid the bills. And that's all John really needed. It was the kind of job where you could forget about everything else, tune out the world, and lose yourself in monotony. But lately, something had felt off. Nothing drastic, just little things that didn't sit right. At first, it was small noises, a scraping sound in the walls during the night shift. Then there were shadows. They weren't anything you could put your finger on, just flickers in the corner of your eye. Always just out of reach. John chalked it up to the long hours and lack of sleep. The factory was old, the kind of place where the floors creaked with every step, where pipes hissed and groaned on the walls, but he'd worked there for years, and he'd never seen anything to suggest that it was haunted or anything like that. It was just a factory, just a job. But as the weeks wore on, things got weirder. One evening, during the late shift, John was alone in the factory. The rest of the workers had clocked out hours ago, and the machinery around him whirred and clanged in the eerie quiet. He adjusted the settings on his lathes, the noise of the machine grinding against metal oddly soothing. Then he heard it, a sound like footsteps, muffled but unmistakable. Someone walking on steel catwalks above him. John froze, listening intently, but the sound stopped as suddenly as it had started. Maybe it was just the air pressure messing with the pipes again, or the wind rustling through the old windows. He tried to shake it off, but he couldn't. Every minute felt like an hour. The factory seemed to grow larger and more oppressive, the machines more alien and sinister. He glanced around, half expecting to see something out of his corner of his eye, but there was nothing. After what felt like hours, he finally finished the last of his tasks and began his walk through the factory to the exit. As he passed the break room, he noticed the door was slightly ajar. He hadn't left it like that. He paused, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. Probably just someone else, he muttered, under his breath. Forget it. But as he pushed the door open, his blood ran cold. The room was completely empty, the chairs around the table neatly arranged as if no one had been there for hours. But there, on the table, was something else, something new. A small, handwritten note. Get out. John's heart pounded in his chest. He felt a chill crawl up his spine as he stared at the words, his mind racing. He had never seen this note before. No one else was supposed to be here. Panic gripped him. He needed to leave. Fast. He bolted for the door, his footsteps echoing off the walls of the empty factory. As he reached for the door handle, something caught his eye. A shadow moving at the far end of the factory floor. His breath got caught in his throat. A figure. A man. John's mind raced. There hadn't been anyone else working tonight. His heart hammered in his chest as he backed away slowly. His eyes never leaving the dark shape at the far end of the room. The figure was tall, its features indistinct, swallowed up by the dim lighting, but its presence was unmistakable. Without thinking, John ran. His breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted toward the exit. He could hear the sound of footsteps behind him, growing louder and closer with each passing second. A voice, cold and low, echoed in his head. Get out! Get out! Get out! John reached the front doors and shoved them open, nearly falling into the gravel outside. He didn't stop to look back. He just kept running, not stopping until he was halfway home. Gasping for air, his body was shaking. The next day, John didn't go to work. He called in sick, something he rarely did. His mind was racing, but he didn't know who to talk to. Who could he even tell? That he'd seen someone who wasn't supposed to be there? That the factory, the place he'd worked for at so many years, suddenly felt like it was watching him? He tried to push it out of his mind, but when he finally returned to work a few days later, it was impossible to ignore. The break room door was still ajar. The note, get out, was gone, but it didn't matter. Something had changed. He could feel it. And that night, as he worked the late shift again, he swore he saw the shadow in the distance, closer this time. A cold voice, almost a whisper, came from the far side of the factory floor. You're not leaving. John's breath hitched. He froze. His hands gripped the machinery as the shadow in the distance shifted again. The factory was never just a job, he realized. It was a place that had always been waiting for him, waiting for someone, and now that it had him, it would never let him go.